Hey guys, I hope that you are doing well. We are on Genesis 28 this week in our journey through Genesis, over halfway there and almost to 30. And lots of great movement. And we find ourselves in the story of Jacob at this point, right? Esau and Jacob. And, one of the things we see about Esau in 27 before this is that Esau was told not to marry. Esau and Jacob were told not to marry certain population of women, and Esau disobeyed that, but Jacob ends up being the one who obeys that. And it says here that Isaac did bless Jacob because he did know that Jacob was the true heir, even though he really wanted to be able to bless Esau. And so Isaac summons him, blesses him again, and tells him, do not marry a Canaanite girl. But he tells him where to go in order to find the girl. And he says, may God bless you and make you fruitful and multiply you so that you become an assembly of peoples. May God give you and your offspring the blessing of Abraham so that you may possess the land. And so basically he's repeating God's covenantal blessing that God gave to Abraham to Jacob and says, hey, if you, I'm praying this blessing over you, but the reality for you is that you cannot get a wife from the Canaanite people. Meanwhile, when Esau hears this, it says that Jacob listened to his father and mother and went to the other place to find a wife, Paddan Aram. Esau realized his father Isaac disapproved of the Canaanite women, so what did he do? He went to Ishmael and he married, in addition to his other wife, a Canaanite woman, right? And so Esau disobeys this result, and Jacob obeys this. And you have to ask yourself, why did he not? Why was them marrying a Canaanite girl such a big deal? Well, one of the things that we have to understand about faith in general, about religion in general, is that typically faith is and belief and religion is endangered by either persecution or accommodation and assimilation. Right? It is either it's persecuted from the outside, or the people end up accommodating and assimilating into the outside world to a point where they look no different than people who do not follow this God. And we have to understand that one of the things that God has been very clear about from the very beginning is he wants his people to be set apart. He wants his people to look different from the culture around them. He wants his people to be holy. He wants his people to look different. He wants his people to be obedient. He wants his people to be pure in certain ways that the world is not. And so in order to do that, there cannot be compromise. There cannot be accommodation. As a matter of fact, one of the things that has taken Christianity and made it less powerful than it could or should be is we as believers have accommodated in the world too much. We've assimilated with the world too much, right? We have looked, we've in an attempt to reach the world, we now look so much like the world that sometimes you can't tell the difference between somebody who's a Christian and somebody who's not. And how in the world are we ever going to make a difference as Christians if we don't look any different from the world? And so one of our biggest problems is that we're too compromising. We compromise sin. We justify sin. We compromise doing things and living in a culturally acceptable way to the world. And the reality is God from the very beginning of time says, I want my people to be set apart. I want my people to be disciplined. I want my people to be distinctive. I want my people to be holy. I want my people to be faithful. And so that means that we have to disengage from culture so that we don't look like culture. And so that's what he's saying here, right? I want Jacob to follow Yahweh. And in order for that to happen, you cannot assimilate or accommodate people who worship other gods, because eventually what's going to happen is you're going to start worshiping them too. This is exactly what happened to Solomon in Scripture. Started out really great, married a lot of women. A lot of them had gods other than Yahweh. He ends up worshiping other gods, right? And his life goes off the rails. And so the reality is we have to be a people who look different, who act different, who don't assimilate or accommodate with culture. That's the only way that we can be holy and set apart, all right? And then Jacob comes to a place, and as he's going, he reaches a certain place, and he spent the night there because the sun had set. he took one of the stones and he put it at his head and laid down in that place. And he dreamed, right? He sees this stairway and angels are going up and down this ladder. And the Lord is standing there and telling him, I'm the Lord, the God of your father. I'm going to give you and your offspring this land. Your offspring is going to be like the dust, right? The Abrahamic covenantal language is what he's using here. All the peoples on earth will be blessed through you, just like he told Abraham. He said, look, and this is so important, and I think this is not just true of Jacob. I think this is true of anybody who belongs to the Lord. He says, look, I am with you, and I'll watch over you wherever you go. He says, I'll bring you back to this land. Like, you're going to leave this land, but I'm going to bring you back here. This is the land I'm going to give you, and I'm not going to leave you until I've done what I've promised you. Listen, this is the truth about God. God is with us no matter where we go. He will not leave us or forsake us. The Christian promise is not that bad things won't happen. It's just that whenever they do, God's promise is to be with us. And God meets Jacob in this place because God can meet us anywhere, at any time, in any place. Right? It's so encouraging to me that he sees this ladder with angels coming down. There's this open, this open traffic between heaven and earth. Right? There's this unseen realm and the seen realm, and they're interacting, and God is sovereign not only over the unseen realm but also over the seen realm as well. And God promises that God is a good shepherd who is going to be with us, who's going to protect us, who's going to provide for us. That's God's promise to us. He's going to be with you. He's going to provide for you. He's going to be your shepherd, and he's going to protect you. And then Jacob wakes up and he says, well, I know that God is in this place, right? I know that God is in this place. He said, I didn't know it. This place was not important until the presence of God got here. And now it is important, not because the place is important, but because the presence of God is important. What an awesome place this is. He said, this is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. And so what made it the house of God? God's presence. It wasn't a building. It wasn't it was God's presence was in that place. And so he takes the rock, right? Indicative of this is going to be the house of God. This is where God's presence resides. And he puts it there and sets up a marker there and pours oil on top of it. And he named the place Bethel, right? Because it was where God was. And that's what made the place important. It's because it was where God was. And then Jacob ends up making a vow to God as a result of everything that God's told him, as a result of God visiting him, as a result of God's presence being in this place. Jacob makes a vow, because the reality is when we sense God, when we hear God, when we know God's presence is with us, it leads us to something, right? To living life differently. And so Jacob says, listen, if you're going to do all of this for me, then you will be my God. And this stone where I've set up marker, it's going to be your house, right? So God is important. He says, hey, I'm going to follow you. You're going to be my God, right? Like, this is when we encounter God's presence and we encounter God and we hear from God, it's like eventually we have to make a decision. Is this going to be our Lord? Is this going to be our God or not? Are we going to go the way of the world or the way of ourselves or the way of the enemy? Or are we going to follow God? And he says, I'm going to follow God. His house, his presence right here is going to be important to me. But not only that, I'm going to give you a tenth of all that you give me. He worships him by giving back to him because he understands that it all belongs to God, that God is sovereign and providential over all of it. And because it's all of God's, he worships him by giving part of it back to him. This should be our response when we encounter God. We hear from God. We encounter God's presence. Our response should be, okay, God, I'm with you. I'm for you. I want to be obedient to you. I want to follow you. And I'm going to worship you, not only with my lips, but also with my life and also with my resources and my time, right? I'm going to worship you by doing these things and by giving back to you. And notice that Jacob did that voluntarily, right? When we give, it should be cheerfully, it should be generously, and it should be voluntarily as we give back to God because of who he is to us. And so we see an incredible story of Jacob, who has made the decision, this is going to be my God, I'm going to follow him. I trust in him. I believe that what he told me, he's going to do it. I believe that he is a promise maker and a promise keeper. And because of that, I'm going to follow him, and I'm going to be a worshiper of him. And I'm willing to live life differently, to marry these other women so that culturally I am a part of the people of God that are set apart. I love you guys. We'll see you next week for Genesis 29.